and I commend your department in the pursuit and the end of that goal. One of the results of our open border policies supported by the previous administration was significant growth in ICE's non-detained docket, growing from 3.7 million at the end of FY 2021 to 7.6 million at the end of 2024. That is a 105% increase. Many will commit crimes while here, waiting their turn to be processed, which is unacceptable and why I fought so hard for the Lake and Riley Act to pass Congress. And that is also why I was proud to be there when President Trump signed that into law. I am incredibly proud when you look at the work that Alabama does to support the Department of Homeland Security and the equities there and so many hardworking, dedicated public servants who show up every single day to fulfill that mission. From the incredible collaboration between DHS and our college programs on research, to the HIS National Academy in Huntsville, to the Coast Guard's Aviation Training Center in Mobile. It's gratifying to see that I represent a state that plays such an important role in protecting our country. Alabama is also home to some key institutions that fit within the administration's priorities of empowering state and local law enforcement to have a seat at the table when it comes to disaster recovery and national security. Both FEMA's Center for Domestic Preparedness and the National Computer Forensic Institute in Hoover provide key resources to local officials across our nation to ensure that they are equipped with the best knowledge, skills, and tools needed to protect and serve the United States of America. It is unfortunate that trainings have been canceled, especially at a time when cities across this country begin to prepare for the World Cup and the Olympics. Madam Secretary, I am certainly open to conversations about how all of this evolves, but I want to make sure that we are looking at future threats as well as existing threats, and I believe that we can do both. Another FEMA area that not only saves taxpayer dollars, but saves taxpayer lives is the BRIC program. Since President Trump signed the Disaster Recovery Reform Act, which authorizes BRIC, nearly $5 billion has gone to mitigation projects across 55 states and territories and 37 tribal nations that requested funding. This is clearly a popular and important program. The program obviously is not without its challenges. Applying and implementing BRIC grants requires resources to many cities, states, and tribes that they may not have. But rather than ceasing to implement it, we should work together to identify ways that BRIC could be amended to be less complex and more efficient. Madam Secretary, the people up here look forward to working with you and your team. We look forward to conversations about the President's FY26 budget for DHS. From what I've seen, I am personally supportive of zeroing out the Shelter and Services Program, and I look forward to conversations about FEMA, CISA, and TSA. I hope that we will see requests for base increases to CBP, ICE, and elsewhere within DHS. You have an incredibly difficult job, Madam Secretary, and have stepped up to do it during one of the most challenging times. I want to thank you for your service, and I look forward to your testimony today and to working with you and your team to making sure that America's borders are safe and its people are secure. I now turn to Senator Murphy and recognize him for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. I'm sorry that I missed your call yesterday. I look forward to working closely with you. I say this with seriousness and respect, but your department is out of control. You are spending like you don't have a budget. You're on the verge of running out of money for the fiscal year. You are illegally refusing to spend funds that have been authorized by this Congress and appropriated by this committee. You are ignoring the immigration laws of this nation, implementing a brand new immigration system that you have invented that has little relation to the statutes that you are required, that you are commanded to follow, as spelled out in your oath of office. You are routinely violating the rights of immigrants who may not be citizens, but whether you like it or not, they have constitutional and statutory rights when they reside in the United States. Your agency acts as if laws don't matter, as if the election gave you some mandate to violate the Constitution and the laws passed by this Congress. It did not give you that mandate. You act as if your disagreement with the law, or even the public's disagreement with the law, is relevant and gives you the ability to create your own law. It does not give you that ability. Let's start with your spending. You are on track to trigger the Anti-Deficiency Act. That means you are going to spend more money than you have been allocated by Congress. This is a rare occurrence, and it is wildly illegal. Your agency will be broke by July, over 2 months before the end of the fiscal year. You may not think that Congress has provided enough money to ICE, But the Constitution and the federal law does not allow you to spend more money than you have been given or to invent money. And this obsession with spending at the border, as the chairwoman mentioned, has left the country unprotected elsewhere. The security threats to the United States are higher, not lower, than when Trump came to office. To fund the border, you have illegally gutted spending for cybersecurity. As we speak, Russian and Chinese hackers are having a field day attacking our nation. You've withdrawn funds for disaster prevention. Storms are going to kill more people in this country because of your illegal withholding of these funds. Your myopia about the border, fueled by President Trump's prejudice against people who speak a different language, has shattered many of this country's most important defenses. Now let's talk about the impoundments. When Congress appropriates funds for a specific purpose, the administration has no discretion as to whether to spend or not spend that money unless you go through a very specific process with this committee. Let me give you two of many instances of this illegal impoundment. The first is the Shelter and Services Program. Senator Britt may want to zero that account out, but that account is funded, and it was funded in a bipartisan way. You don't like the program. Your policy is to treat migrants badly. I think that's abhorrent, but it doesn't matter that you don't like the program. You cannot cancel spending in this program, and you cannot use the funds as you have to fund other things like ICE. You have also canceled citizenship and integration grants, which help lawful permanent residents become citizens, helping them take the citizenship test. I know your goal is to try to make life as hard as possible for immigrants, but that goal is not broadly shared by the American public. That's why Congress, in a bipartisan way, for decades, has funded this program to help immigrants in this country become citizens. Now let's talk about why encounters at the southern border are down so much. This is clearly going to be your primary talking point today. You will tell us that it represents a success. But the primary reason why encounters are down is because you are brazenly violating the law every hour of every day. You are refusing to allow people showing up at the southern border to apply for asylum. I acknowledge that you don't believe that people should be able to apply for asylum, but you don't get to choose that. The White House doesn't get to choose that. The law requires you to process people who are showing up at the border and who claim asylum. Why? Because our asylum law is a bipartisan commitment, an effort to correct for our nation's unconscionable decision to deny entry to Jews to this country who were being hunted and killed by the Nazis. Our nation, Republicans and Democrats, wrote it into law that we would not repeat that horror ever again, and thus we would allow for people who were fleeing terror and torture to come here, arrive at the border, and make a case for asylum. Finally, let's talk about these disappearances. In an autocratic society, people who the regime does not like are people who are protesting the regime. They are just often picked up off the street, spirited away, sometimes to open-ended detention. Sometimes they're never seen again. What you are doing, both the individuals who have legal rights to stay here, like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, or students who are just protesting Trump's policies, is immoral. And to follow the theme, it is illegal. You have no right to deport a student visa holder with no due process simply because they have spoken in a way that offends the president. You can't remove migrants who a court has given humanitarian protection from removal. Now, reports suggest that you are planning to remove immigrants with no due process and send them to prisons in Libya. Libya is in the middle of a civil war. It is subject to a level 4 travel advisory, meaning we tell American citizens never to travel to Libya. We don't have an embassy there because it is not safe for our diplomats. Sending migrants with pending asylum claims into a war zone just because it's cruel is so deeply disturbing. Listen, I understand that my Republican colleagues on this committee don't view the policy the way that I do. My Republican colleagues don't share my level of concern for the way that this administration treats immigrants. That's fine. But what I don't understand is why we don't have consensus in the Senate and on this committee on the decision by this administration to impound the spending that we have decided together to allocate in defense of this nation. We as an appropriations committee, we work interminable hours to write and pass a budget. This budget is really hard to write and pass. And so we make ourselves irrelevant when we allow the administration to ignore what we have decided. And then when we look the other way, when the administration rounds up immigrants who are here illegally and have committed no offenses worthy of detainment, we also do potential irreversible damage to the Constitution. These should not be partisan concerns, destroying the power of Congress, eroding individuals' constitutional rights. This should matter to both parties. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here, and I look forward to your testimony.
Madam Secretary, let me first explain that Chair Britt is trying to cover two different subcommittees. She will be returning, but in the meantime has asked that I take the gavel. And fortunately, that means that I get to welcome you, but also ask the first questions. But first, we want to hear your statement. So please proceed.
Yes, well, thank you, Senator Collins. And I do want to thank Senator Britt as well for bringing this group of individuals together for this committee hearing so that we could talk about the priorities of the United States of America and what we can do to work together to secure our homeland. I do want to thank Senator Murphy as well and look forward to our conversations that we can have today and far into the future. In the first 100 days, the Trump administration has already delivered for the American people a drastic turnaround in Homeland Security, from the southern border to investing in our Coast Guard to cybersecurity, and we are just getting started. I'm very proud of the accomplishments that we have made so far and working with President Trump and his leadership since he took office. At the southern border, we have obtained near total control with a 95% decrease in daily encounters since President Trump took office. March saw the lowest number of encounters in this nation's history at less than 7,200. There were days in there where we had less than 200 encounters a day, which is absolutely remarkable. And again, that is the lowest number of encounters at the border in this nation's history. Under the previous administration, when Joe Biden was the president of the United States, U.S. Customs and Border Protection was at times encountering over 15,000 people per day. This astonishing turnaround is a testament to the resolve and to the leadership of President Trump to make America safe, and to the incredible work of the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security. The secure border has allowed Border Patrol to zero in on the cartels and on illicit activities that are going on. President Trump has designated 6 different cartels and violent criminal gangs as foreign terrorist organizations. This has allowed us to use a whole of government approach in how we go after drug traffickers and human traffickers. And in March, fentanyl traffic at the border fell by 54% compared to the previous year. We're enforcing immigration laws to identify, arrest, detain, and remove dangerous illegals from our country. We're prioritizing those who have committed crimes, aliens who are a threat to our public safety and to our national security, especially those who are affiliated with terrorist organizations such as Tren de Aragua and MS-13. This includes those who also have final orders of removal. We've worked to enforce President Trump's America First trade agenda through the U.S. Custom and Border Protection's enforcement. The Biden administration's policies hollowed out our economy and America's industrial base, and it shipped our jobs overseas. President Trump is changing that. His historic actions are proving that tariffs are an effective negotiating tool to address trade imbalances. And in fact, companies are reshoring jobs here every single day. The Department of Homeland Security is reforming, and we're rethinking federal involvement in emergency management. President Trump recently announced that there will be a FEMA review council, which I will co-chair with the Department of Defense Secretary. This council is charged with fixing a broken system that's returning power to state emergency management directors and making America safe. We're also taking steps to defend the nation's transportation systems, which are vulnerable to targets and to attacks. The Transportation Security Administration is responsible for ensuring the security of all those who travel. In a single day, there are over 45,000 flights in this country with nearly 2.9 million passengers in the United States. We're fulfilling our obligation to launch Real ID, which happened yesterday, and we follow federal law as it was passed 20 years ago. Validated IDs will secure travel, safeguard our elections, and make sure that we never open a door to an opportunity for another tragedy like 9/11 again. As technology advances, so do the threats to our nation. And that's why cybersecurity is a crucial component of our security measures we're taking seriously and investing in going forward. Countries like Communist China have built the capability and the intent to infiltrate and potentially disrupt our critical infrastructure. But despite these threats, the Biden administration instead used CISA to play politics and to police speech. Under President Trump, we've been working to get CISA back on mission and make sure that they are securing our infrastructure. The Coast Guard is the only branch of the U.S. Armed Services that are under the Department of Homeland Security. It has many missions with specialized needs. And as we secure the southern border, the cartels have shifted their activities out to the maritime borders. The Coast Guard has already surpassed fiscal year 2024 drug interdiction numbers and search and rescue and illegal interdictions. Still, the Coast Guard is facing our greatest readiness challenge since World War II. With Force Design 2028, we will transform the Coast Guard to make it a more agile, capable, and responsive force. And since I took office, one of the responsibilities that I have is reforming the Secret Service. In the wake of the July 13th assassination attempt, we have needs there that I'm hoping you will consider. We've reassessed the Secret Service's needs. We've refocused recruitment away from DEI objectives and instead focused people in on investing in the agency's zero-fail mission. These accomplishments are just a portion of what the Department of Homeland Security has achieved with President Trump's leadership in the last 100 days. And with the support of this committee, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to make this department more efficient and more effective in securing our nation. I'm so grateful to the men and women of the department, and they are examples of bravery, patriotism, and dedication. It's our responsibility to continue providing them with resources, training, and equipment that they need to do their jobs. Thank you so much for your support, for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. I'd like to first recognize Chair Collins for her round of questioning.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, I want to bring to your attention an important issue that may not yet be one that you've been briefed on. In August of 2023, DHS issued a memo in which the department stated that it had identified more than 270 Chinese-backed illegal marijuana operations in the state of Maine alone, producing up to an estimated $4.3 billion in illicit revenue. These grow houses are primarily run by Chinese organized crime syndicates with ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Our sheriffs and local law enforcement have worked night and day to shut down these grow houses that tend to be located in very rural areas of the state. I hope that the president's more detailed budget request includes funding that can be used to help supplement the county, state, and local law enforcement efforts. DEA has also been involved. IRS has been involved. The FBI is starting to get involved, but DHS obviously has an important role to play. So I hope you will commit today to joining this all of government effort to shut down these dangerous illegal grow houses. Undoubtedly, there's human trafficking going on as well. The marijuana is destroying these houses with black mold because it's grown inside to try to hide what is going on, and it's being smuggled to other states. This isn't just a problem in Maine. Some 22 states have similarly found these illegal grow operations with ties to transnational criminal organizations in China.
Well, thank you, Senator Collins. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention and this important discussion. Obviously, we're very concerned with securing our border and knowing who's coming into our country illegally, but also who's already here. And so you pointing out the fact that we have investments in this country, businesses, and marijuana grow houses that have a presence of ties to the PRC is incredibly alarming. So I agree that we should work together to see what we can do. As you know, the Department of Homeland Security, our mission is to secure the homeland. I tell people quite often that my responsibility lies with everyone who's in this country, comes into this country or leaves, every product that's here that leaves or comes in, and then everything on the internet as well that's communicated or processed. This is alarming that we have China. Not only are they stealing our IP, manipulating their currency, but they're building a presence in this country as well. And so everything that we can do to make sure that we're addressing that and not allowing them to get a foothold within the center of our country and in our important states like Maine is incredibly important. So thank you for bringing it to the attention of everyone today, and I commit to working with you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, as you undoubtedly know, Maine is a great destination for tourists. Last year, we had 14.8 million tourism visits. We're a state of only 1.3 million people. I imagine it's similar to some of what you've experienced when you were governor. So Maine is heavily dependent, particularly our hospitality industry and our agricultural employers, on seasonal temporary workers from other countries who come here under the H-2A program for agricultural workers and the H-2B programs for hospitality workers. There's no way that our state of 1.3 million has the workforce to deal with the influx of tourists and to get our crops out of the ground. Our small businesses, our inns, our restaurants, and our hotels are perfect examples of where foreign nationals who come to our country temporarily to benefit from, but also contribute to the American economy in a lawful way, are absolutely critical. I know that some of the visas have been released by the department, and I would ask for your help in expediting the release of the H-2B visas, in particular, given the upcoming tourism season.
Thank you for that question, Senator. And, as you know, the number of visas allowed is set in statute by Congress, but there is some latitude given to the Secretary. So I certainly take your request and know that many others have asked us to go and give as much latitude as possible, and we are certainly considering and willing to consider that going forward.
Thank you. My time has expired, so I'm just going to put one quick item on your radar screen. And that is, we're seeing some college students from Canada who go to school in northern Maine at the University of Maine at Presque Isle having difficulty in crossing the border, which they used to be able to do very easily. They're totally legal, they have student visas, but they're being subjected to extensive searches and questioning. I don't want us to discourage Canadian students from studying at the Northern Maine institutions that we have for education. So again, I just want to put that on your radar screen. There are so many others who do deserve scrutiny, but these are duly enrolled Canadian students, and they've been crossing the border for years without trouble, and lately they're being subjected to extensive searches and questioning despite having their visas and other documents in order.
Okay, I will certainly look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Murphy.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, AI is an enormous growing industry critical to the future economic health of the country. We have had the benefit over the years of the top talent in AI, researchers, students coming to the United States to help us grow that industry. But for the first time in the last 15 years, there are more top talented individuals and workers in AI leaving the country than coming here. And the reason is pretty simple. People who are coming here to work from overseas through the visa program are very uncertain about what their rights are. And that is because of the actions this administration has taken. So I think it's important to get on the record for those individuals who are here currently and those thinking of coming to the United States to work or to study to understand what their rights are. So let me ask you a series of pretty simple questions. Probably the key of right amongst the 5 freedoms is the right to free speech, the right to express your own personal opinion about politics, culture, the economy. Do you believe that you have the right to detain or deport a U.S. citizen for simply expressing their political opinion, a U.S. citizen?
No.
No. Do you believe that you have the right to detain or deport a legal permanent resident for expressing their political opinion?
I don't make decisions on legal status here in the United States. The Department of State does that. And I would say that as they've gone through an evaluation of who gets a visa, who gets legal status, green cards, they've been evaluating and discussing how that applies.
Well, I acknowledge that you don't. I acknowledge you don't make.
Right.
But if someone is a legal permanent resident of the United States, I'm not talking about an H-1B or a student visa holder. I'm talking about a legal permanent resident. If you are a legal permanent resident, do you have the right to detain or deport that person simply for expressing their political opinion?
The Department of State makes those decisions.
No,
and the
they
Department
don't.
of Homeland Security.
You make that decision about who you have the right to detain or deport. So you are involved in that. Do you believe the United States, do you believe the law allows?
The Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration is enforcing the law, following the constitutional rights of folks who are here as citizens, those who are here legally, and those who are here illegally.
So a legal
that
permanent
have
resident
final
is by
removal
definition
orders.
here legally. Do you believe, I mean, I think this is really troubling if you can't answer this simple question. Do you believe that the U.S. government can detain and deport a legal permanent resident for expressing a political opinion that the administration disagrees with?
The determination you're asking for is based on things that you are determining that the Secretary of State has considered and evaluated. We don't evaluate that, the administration, along with the partnership with the Department of State, on what is political speech and what's an affiliation with a foreign terrorist.
Do you believe?
That's the difference between
you
the two
believe
that you're asking.
that you can detain
We
and
follow
deport
the
a
direction of
legal
federal
permanent
law.
resident for expressing a political
We have not
opinion?
detained we have not deported anybody who's a legal permanent resident or a citizen of the United States.
Then say you don't have the ability to do that.
We have
clarify that
That
for
is
the
true.
millions of.
That is exactly what I'm doing, is that we have followed exactly what the law is and that we have not detained or deported anybody who's a citizen or has legal status in this country. We are focused on the worst of the worst dangerous
You
criminals.
do not believe you have
to get them out of
you
the
do not believe
country.
you have the ability to do that.
We have not done that at all. And the Trump administration has no plans.
Well, just
to
because
do
you haven't
that.
done
We
it
do
doesn't
not
mean
do
that
it.
you won't do it in the
We
future.
are following
do you
the
believe you have the
federal law
ability
to
to do that or
ensure that
not?
we are doing
I think you
the
were going to.
exact appropriate thing in partnership with the Department of State and in partnership with the Trump administration.
Have you read I assume you have read the Supreme Court decision in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia?
Yes.
That court decision requires the administration to facilitate Kilmar Abrego Garcia's release from El Salvador. Can you describe the steps that you have taken to facilitate this release? And specifically, can you answer as to whether you have reached out to your counterpart in El Salvador to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's release?
Abrego Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador and should never have been in this country and will not be coming back to this country. There is no scenario where Abrego Garcia will be in the United States again. If he were to come back, we would immediately deport him again because he is a terrorist, he's a human smuggler, and he is a wife beater.
Does the You've read the Supreme Court decision. Does the Supreme Court decision not require you to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia?
The Trump administration is complying with all court orders and judges' orders.
Does the Supreme Court order require you to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia?
Is a citizen of El Salvador. It is up to the president of the El Salvador to make the decision.
You're a defendant
on
in the
if he is
case.
coming back. It's been a big topic of conversation between all of us, between the country. When the president visited the United States of America, it was discussed and talked about there. The president has been very clear on this issue, as the Secretary of State and I have as well. Abrego Garcia is not a citizen of this country and is a dangerous individual who does not belong here.
I will not ask another question, Madam Chair.
If we were back in this country, we would immediately
But the discussion
deport him.
ends when the Supreme Court rules 9-0 that you have to facilitate his release. And the fact that you can't even acknowledge the wording of the order, which commands you to facilitate his release, and you advertise to this committee that you are going to willfully ignore the ruling. And that is incredibly
true,
chilling
Senator.
for the balance of powers in a democracy that relies on the executive branch to honor decisions made by the highest court of the land.
Madam Secretary, I'd actually like to take a little bit of my time real quick to turn to an actual Maryland resident. And I believe if we're going to spend that much time talking about Mr. Abrego Garcia, we need to talk about Rachel Marin.
Yep.
And she was a citizen of Maryland who was brutally raped and murdered in 2023 by another criminal illegal alien from El Salvador who had no business being in the United States. May her story and others like it serve as a reminder to the human cost of unchecked illegal immigration policies, the need to secure our border, and the need to swiftly remove criminal illegal aliens from the United States. Speaking of, let's go back. Take a look at what President Trump inherited. We talked about this earlier, but when Joe Biden took office, there were 3.3 million people on the non-detained docket. When President Trump took office, that number had risen to 7.6 million people on the non-detained docket. When you look at the docket, the President Biden and his administration spent their entire term simply allowing people and aliens to cross the border into our communities. Of those who had been given their final orders of removal, meaning they had their due process, the Biden administration simply sat on their hands instead of actively working to remove those individuals, which created chaos and unfortunately criminal opportunities on our interior. Thankfully, we have new leadership at the White House and a department who will no longer tolerate the subversion of our immigration laws and activities. I think since we're here to talk about the budget today, that's what I'd like to talk about. What do you and your department need, the brave men and women who serve alongside you, in order to secure our border, in order to keep our interior safe from coast to coast, and to continue to make America a safe, secure, and prosperous place to be?
Well, the Department of Homeland Security is tasked with overseeing 23 different components that are pretty broad. And it was formed after 9/11 in response to the terrorist attacks to help us secure our country and everything that's in the interior of our country. The president's budget request, along with reconciliation package, focus on what some of our greatest threats are that face our future and our children and grandchildren's ability to grow up here and to have a future. And that is continuing to secure our border, to make sure we're addressing technology needs that have been neglected for far too long, get our Coast Guard to the standard to what the missions are requiring them to be at to be successful, building more wall, more agents for CBP, more ICE agents and beds so that we can remove illegal criminals out of this country and dangerous individuals that are threatening our public safety. And then also going forward and looking at how we conduct operations on training our law enforcement officers, how we can put CISA back on mission at focusing on cybersecurity. The requests going forward focus in those areas and TSA so that we have the technology upgrades that we need to really make sure that we are doing due diligence to secure our country and the systems that help run our critical infrastructure.
I really appreciate that, and I'd love a commitment for you to continue to work on what it is that you need moving forward as this develops.
Yeah.
this country safe. On that, your predecessor actually refused to call what was going on at the border a crisis. It is clear that's exactly what was happening. You also have shown that coming in, we did not need any new legislation to actually secure the border. You have taken action. President Trump has taken action to secure it. I mean, creating a space that we haven't seen in decades. You talked about a number of things. One of the things you just mentioned was a border wall. Can you talk about the construction of a border wall and what that would do for the men and women of CBP and overall at DHS? I know that we are a nation of immigrants. We're proud of that. We're also a nation of law, and lawlessness has to stop. And I believe that anybody on this dais that locks their door at night should understand the need for a border wall. The American people should have that level of security when they go to sleep at night. So can you talk about the importance of that and kind of how you see that unfolding?
We have currently over 700 miles of border wall on the southern border and infrastructure that is there operating today. Since President Trump has been in office, we've constructed another 77 miles that is in place. That is an inclusion of steel bollard wall that has been built, but also temporary wall that has been put forward with concertina wire and panels. And then also we have some waterborne buoys that are being utilized as well. We have 11 contracts that have been allocated to continue building infrastructure, and then also 5 more that are pending to be allocated to build more miles to have that infrastructure there to help secure vulnerable areas. Now, the border wall will look different based on what the topography is and the geography is of the area. So there's some areas on the northern border and the southern border and out in our maritime infrastructure that we need that will have technology. It'll utilize Aerostar systems, radio frequencies, satellite systems. Those upgrades just simply haven't been made or prioritized under the last administration and need to be done. So we will use a combination for what's appropriate out there for the topography and working with the local states and tribal areas to make sure that it's something that secures our country, but also is something that they can help support and secure as well.
Thank you for that commitment. Vice Chair Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Britt, and I look forward to working with you and Ranking Member Murphy in this Congress. Madam Secretary, as Senator Murphy mentioned in his opening statement, Secretary Noem, under your leadership, we have seen you ignore our appropriation laws, our Constitution, common sense, and even basic humanity. And like a lot of Americans, I really have been horrified by the lawlessness and incompetence and cruelty that we have all witnessed. And for all the talk about going after criminals, you have sidetracked DHS staff who are investigating drug dealers, terrorists, human traffickers. And rather than photo ops, we need more of your focus on providing basic diligence, because your crackdown has roped in American citizens and people who are here legally with no criminal record. Now, I'm not going to ask you whether that was right or wrong. I know it's wrong. The world knows it's wrong. And I think the first thing the history is going to say about your leadership is that you were responsible for many of these travesties. So I'm deeply concerned. You've deported a 4-year-old U.S. citizen with cancer. You've disappeared people to a notorious prison in El Salvador. And you have spent $100 million in taxpayer dollars to air TV ads thanking President Trump. That is really reckless. It's unacceptable, and in my opinion, can't continue. The American people are paying for this with our taxpayer dollars and with their most basic rights. Now, in the last 3 months, you have frozen or canceled over $100 billion in funding that was approved by Congress, bipartisan. We are talking about everything from disaster relief to grants that keep people safe. But when my staff has requested information on the status of this unacceptable holdup, the department failed to provide any acceptable justification. This illegal freeze, and it is illegal, is taking a real toll on communities who are waiting on the investments that Congress has delivered. So will you commit to immediately unpausing these funds?
Well, Senator, thank you for covering a lot of topics there. Let me touch on a few of those right away.
Well,
What the
if
Trump
you could
administration
answer-
is doing
I know
is
you've taught-
enforcing
you
the
an-
law for the first time. Under the Biden administration,
I'm asking you about the funds. that
illegal
are out there.
aliens were prioritized over American citizens. Now the scales of justice have been leveled and
Madam
no one
Chair,
is
I'm gonna
treated
reclaim
better
my
than
time
anyone
because I
else.
asked you a
Citizens
specific
are
question.
treated the same,
Madam
and these
Secretary,
illegal
I know
aliens
your
and criminals
answer.
are
I
being
heard it
deported.
previously. I'm asking you a
The
specific
grants that you are
question.
referencing,
Correct.
the grants that you are referencing have been paused and reevaluated to make sure that they are truly being spent in the way to which they were appropriated.
Well, these were,
Many of these grants were being diverted
Madam
into things they
Secretary,
were never intended
these
to.
funds were passed on a bipartisan basis by members. in
Absolutely.
this
And the Biden
Congress.
administration perverted them in how they used them, diverted them to facilitate illegal immigration, to house people in places like the Roosevelt Hotel who held illegal
Okay,
criminals
We're
that took the
talking,
life
Madam
of
Chair,
Laken
about
Riley.
$100
think all of us
billion.
have
It
recognized
is
that
not
the
credible to
victims
me that
here are
all
the
the
people who have
recipients
died
of
and
that.
lost their children
Madam
because of this
Secretary, it
situation.
is not credible. Madam Chair, it is not credible that $100 billion is used to break the law. That just cannot be true. And let me change this a little bit. On the other hand, I am very concerned that DHS is now dramatically overspending funding that Congress has not provided. If you were a CEO doing that, I don't think you'd be in your job long. We need accountability and we need answers. And that includes informative responses to oversight questions sent to the department over the last 3 months. I am ranking member on this committee. I have worked with every member of this committee. We take our responsibility serious to fund your department and others. We need to have answers. We need to have accountability, and we need to make sure you're not overspending money that you were not allocated.
Well, thank you for that question. I will be very
not really a
clear in the
question, it's a
fact.
statement.
Do you want me to respond?
Well, you can.
Well, I've worked many jobs in my life, but I also have been a CEO. I've run
I'm not
businesses. I've been a
questioning your
governor.
credentials. I'm
and it is
questioning your spending.
We are prioritizing where our security needs are in this country, and we are hoping that this body will agree that reconciliation is necessary to address the things that have been neglected in this country for too long, that we have the technology upgrades, the manpower upgrades that are necessary. So the $170 billion request for the Department of Homeland Security
Madam
is
Chair, my
incredibly
time is
important to
running
make
out.
sure
and
we
I
have the
do have a
tools that
couple
we
of
need.
additional questions. The fact is that you've not been given this funding. Saying that it's going to come in reconciliation that has not passed is not an acceptable answer. I did want to ask about FEMA and disaster relief. This is really important. A lot of disaster relief has been politicized. You've endorsed eliminating FEMA outright. We have seen an upheaval at FEMA that is going to put lives in jeopardy. 1 in 5 FEMA employees have been pushed out, taking this administration's so-called buyout offer. We are losing indispensable staff just weeks away from fire and hurricane season, and over $100 billion in disaster relief and FEMA grants are still being held up. DHS is making it a lot harder to qualify for relief, something people in my home state of Washington are experiencing firsthand. Multiple requests from governors have been rejected in recent weeks, including a request from our state. And we haven't been given any response about this. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, has President Trump directed you to prioritize funding for Republican states?
Absolutely not.
Have you directed your staff to prioritize funding to Republican-led states over Democratic
Absolutely
states?
not.
Have
There
your
is, under
staff-
this administration, there will not be any politicization of support, relief, FEMA assistance, or grants given based on politics.
Well,
Every single person
there
will be
is a
treated the same.
clear
It will be very
trend-
different than the Biden
Madam Secretary,
administration.
there's a clear trend of Republican-led states getting very fast responses and funding. Democrat-led states are being forced to wait. We have never treated FEMA as a partisan issue in this country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, and it's great to see you, Secretary Noem, and it was a pleasure to serve with you in the House for so many years. I just want to make a statement in the beginning because this chart, which you can't see, but many of us have seen, the blue lines being the number of people that were coming across the border during the Biden administration, and then the red is what you and the President have done over the last 3 months. I say congratulations. Results speak loudly. Not only are migrant encounters down 95%, but the gotaways are down 99%. To put it simply, migrants are just not slipping through. They're not evading our border patrol. I boil it down to two basic strategies that the administration has done that the previous administration could have done but totally ignored. One is deterrence. When possible illegals look to the United States and see that we are following through on deportation orders in larger numbers, I think that's a huge deterrence along with other things that are occurring. The other one is enforcement of the law. You already just said that. So is there anything else you would add specifically, very shortly, that you can attribute this dramatic drop? You're being accused of breaking the law, and that's the reason the numbers are down. I personally don't believe that.
Well, I think having a strong leader in the White House that says we will enforce our laws in this country has worldwide effects. In fact, in where I have traveled to countries in El Salvador, Mexico, and Colombia, their leaders and their governments said, when you talk about the fact that you are now enforcing the laws in America, when your president talks about it, when we see these ads that are running in our country saying, if you want to come to the country and America illegally, don't come. Come the legal way, do the right way. We are now enforcing our laws. They say it has an overwhelming effect. In fact, in Mexico, some government officials, when I was there visiting with them and the president, said that they believe 500 to 600,000 people just in Mexico turned around before they ever got to our border in the last 3 months, because they got the message clearly when they were on their way. They heard that and they went back home. Also, I would say Border Patrol is thrilled. They get to finally do their jobs.
Right.
They get to finally, the morale has never been better. Recruitment is fantastic. ICE is recruiting. CBP's up 54%. I'd say the Coast Guard is up over 100% in recruitment, and the Secret Service is up over 200%. So the fact that they have an administration that's letting them do their jobs again and actually following the law is something they're very proud of. And so I think those two things are really what's making them proud.
Okay, you and I talked about this on the phone because of the drug scourge, the non-intrusive inspection, which is a lot of the technologies that can detect in large, when semis are coming through, there's a whole lot coming through the border, and we want to continue that free flow of goods. Where are you on that in this budget? Certainly you need more dollars to be able to, I think the numbers are low, how many you actually inspect or have been inspected. You need the technology.
Yeah, our ports of entry need new technology and scanners that we just simply aren't scanning many shipping containers right now adequately. A lot of our air freight isn't scanned. Some of these scanners that we have in place need infrastructure around them so that they work in the heat and in the rain. Sometimes they're dysfunctional and shut down. We have railroad cars coming in that aren't getting inspected, and then small packages every day that are being shipped in by the millions that we are not inspecting at all. So the kind of technology needs that we have to invest in are costly, but they're secure our country. And when we have a foreign enemy country like China and the PRC that's trying to kill off our next generation of Americans, which is what they're doing to weaken our economy and our society, those upgrades and that technology advancement will incredibly help us make sure that we know what's coming into this country and it's not a poison that will be killing our kids and our next generation.
Certainly have my support with that. I did chair this subcommittee at one point with the ranking member. He was chairing and I was ranking, so we're getting to know each other very well. You have my support there. I do want to say, and I am concerned about the FEMA issue. Coming from a small state that is subject to a lot of natural disasters, flooding in most cases, FEMA, my experience with FEMA, has it been flawless? Has it been, a smooth road? No, but I think it's a vital function. And I'm concerned if we turn it all over to the states, capacity for the state to really handle this is something that, so I would ask you to tread lightly. I don't really need a response there, but I do want to put on the record here that I am concerned about, I do think we need a national response to disasters. Does it look just like FEMA? I hope, I hope the changes that are made will be able to have them to be able to react quickly and to help our state and local resources. I did invite you to the Advanced Training Center where we do training for Border Patrol. Look forward to seeing you there, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Capito, and thrilled to hear about the morale at DHS. That's exciting, Madam Secretary. Next up, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here this morning and for your testimony. I just want to, I'm not going to ask you to respond to this, but just to be clear, I think everybody on this committee agrees that we need to secure our southern border.
Mhm.
We may disagree on exactly how to do that, but I think that is a value that most Americans share. I do think we can do it in a way that still provides due process to people who are here as green card holders. And I'm particularly concerned when I get calls from New Hampshire citizens who are stopped at our border and interrogated without any process, without being told why they're being stopped. So I just want to put that on your radar so that you understand that that is a concern that we are seeing and hearing from American citizens about. I have been concerned for a long time through a number of administrations about the lack of technology on our northern border. In New Hampshire, we have video cameras that are supposed to pick up people coming across the border, and there's no service to those video cameras because we don't have cell service on our northern border. Our Border Patrol station in Pittsburgh gets its power from Canada, and in 2018, Congress passed the Mobile Now Act to speed up deployment of communications equipment infrastructure on federal property. It's not just a public safety issue, it's a national security imperative, as I'm sure you would agree. So understaffing, however, and red tape means that getting folks connected still takes way too long. And we've had some issues with the department in trying to get some of this equipment that we need on our northern border. So will you commit to ensuring that DHS will move expeditiously to improve communications infrastructure along New Hampshire's northern border?
Yeah, Senator, I will work with you on this. This is something that's come up several times with many of our senators and congressmen and women that represent the northern border. And I think that's a concern I hear quite often from people is with all the focus on the southern border, are you neglecting the northern border? And we are not. We have not pulled resources from the northern border, but we also recognize that we've got deficiencies there too. We do have some predator drones that are up there.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the reality is that the Stone Garden funds that used to have a percentage dedicated to the northern border have been taken for the southern border. So that our local law enforcement officials don't have the ability to access those funds and to get those grants in a way that's really important to help. So I hope you will look into that.
Those funds have been very important for our law enforcement. And so those are being reevaluated as well and assessed. And so I've had several people indicate to me that those are important to their local areas and local communities. The cameras you talked about, yes, do need to be fixed. The cell phone service and their reliance on that is not dependable, and we need the new technology upgrades in order to make sure that we can keep those operating. And we need more UAS and counter UAS technology at the northern border as well.
I understand that ICE has entered into an interagency agreement with the Bureau of Prisons to hold ICE detainees in our federal prison in Berlin, FCI Berlin, New Hampshire. I'm sure that you're aware that the Bureau of Prisons has faced chronic shortages in staffing for a number of years. This is particularly evident in Berlin, where it's being staffed at just over 60% for its corrections officers, and now it's hosting more than 230 detainees. So can you talk about how you're working to ensure that our federal prisons who are under contract with ICE are adequately staffed, and will you commit to ensuring that the Bureau of Prisons under contract with ICE is given the support that they need in order to hold those detainees?
Absolutely. That's all part of the evaluation that happens before that contract goes into place, is making sure they have the staffing and the requirements that meet the level that ICE detention requires. Many times the request we hear from local or state law enforcement or prison systems that want to help facilitate the detention of illegal criminals, such as we're addressing right now, are asking us to relax our federal standards so that they qualify, are asking us for more latitude. So our standards
I was
have
just
been
there. I can
in the
tell you they were not
contract.
asking that.
Yeah,
in
they
Berlin.
may not have been up at your facility, but what I would say is that all of those boxes have to be checked and staffing requirements have to be met in order for that contract to be facilitated and utilized.
Well, what I heard is that we have trouble attracting people, corrections officers, other staff that we need, psychologists and medical staff. And so I think it's absolutely critical that we ensure that if ICE is going to use those facilities, that the funding is there to provide adequate
Yep.
staffing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have another issue, and I'm out of time, but I just want to put on your radar screen that we appropriated $200 million to recapitalize facilities for the Coast Guard. One of those facilities that was damaged in storms is in Newcastle, New Hampshire. It's a facility that serves the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. It's critical to national security. I hope you will work with us to ensure that the funding goes to help rebuild those facilities that need it.
Yeah, we'll certainly take a look at that. As you know, we've proposed a new investment and future for the Coast Guard called Force Design 2028. And so we're excited about that because it recognizes the deficiencies that the Coast Guard has had to live with for far too long. It adds 15,000 coasties to the force. It also addresses not just cutters and not just airframe, but also infrastructure. What we need for buildings and for docks and for abilities to ports and infrastructure to really facilitate what they really provide for us. They are also a key part of not just search and rescue, but also our interdiction efforts right now as well. And we're not keeping up with the cartels out on the water.
I'm a big fan. I just don't want us to divert that funding.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I certainly want to thank Madam Secretary for being here today and so impressed with the way you have just taken off so quickly in leading this agency. You know, as a member of this body, as an American, but as the mother of a 26-year-old daughter, I certainly appreciate what you're doing to secure our homeland. And your commitment has just been unsurpassed by anybody. And I've watched you closely, and it's a tall drink of water. Heading this agency is no small task, but I am certainly supporting you. I would like to briefly mention the proposed reductions to the FEMA budget. You know, Mississippi, we have hurricanes, we have tornadoes, and FEMA has been a part of my life ever since I have been in public office because of the situations. Even Senator Shaheen was part of our tornado one time last year in Mississippi, and we had some recently that hasn't been approved yet. Little town in Walthall County, Mississippi called Tylertown, Mississippi, had a tornado. I was there the day after the storm, and we're really seeking some relief there. But how will DHS make sure that states like Mississippi, which, like I said, are feeling the impact of so many, will continue to receive the support they need to prepare for and recover from what we have now and future emergencies?
Yeah, President Trump has been very clear that he believes that the way that FEMA exists today should not continue. It needs to be reformed. It needs to empower states to build in the structure that they need to best respond to disasters. He's seen the failures over the years of FEMA, how it didn't show up for individuals. It targeted people based on political party. It claims that haven't been paid for 15 to 20 years and recognizes the best responders are those locally and that the federal government should be there to support. So his goal is to redo this agency in a way that empowers our states, recognizing that every state's not at the same level of response today, that it's going to take some effort to get them all ready to really truly take over the emergency management processes of their state. And so what we can do to equip and to train them and then give control back locally is critically important. Also, the grants that have come through FEMA, making sure they're not being abused to facilitate illegal immigration, to focus on true resiliency, on true helping building dams and infrastructure, culverts that are the right size, instead of using them for bike paths and shade trees like the Biden administration does. So making sure that the dollars that we have in this agency, which consistently is spending in the red and not able to be budgeted for because of what happens, he wants to make sure that those reforms are happening where states are empowered to do the response and trained and equipped. And then the federal government would come in and support them and financially be there when they need them on their worst day.
Thank you, because there's many days we really need them.
Mhm.
And Mississippi also has a proud legacy of supporting DHS missions across multiple domains, from helicopters flown by the Coast Guard
Mhm.
and the CBP to the national security cutters and future polar security cutters built in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So our state plays a central role in helping secure the homeland. But what I would like to highlight today is a wonderful program at Mississippi State University that supports DHS. And as you may be aware, DHS Justice Next Gen program at Mississippi State serves an incredibly valuable resource. And the primary mission of this is to serve the operational entities within DHS through research, development, testing, integration, and the evaluation of UAS, the unmanned aerial systems, and related technologies to that. But the Justice Program has credited MSU with a number of developments that have enhanced the technology and the efficiency for the operational components. So we're real proud of that. But as we look ahead, I hope that you will view justice as an important effort. And do you have any thoughts on these programs or similar programs?
Yeah, the Justice Program is very important and is being continued going forward. And we recognize the partnership that we've had with so many states in these projects. So that is something that the Department of Homeland Security is very willing and able in the future to partner with you.
Well, it takes so much to make these things successful, but we're really proud of that. And again, thank you for everything you're doing. You are doing an incredible job, and I am thrilled that you are there.
Thank you.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Secretary, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And I was glad to see in your recent testimony that you reaffirmed your obligations to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And I understand you had an exchange with Senator Murphy on the Abrego Garcia case. And so I'm just going to put the question directly to you. Are you or DHS doing anything to comply with the 9-0 Supreme Court order to facilitate his return to the United States? Just yes or no?
This administration is following all federal court orders.
Madam Secretary, this is
And
a simple
it's the
question. I'm
president's
asking,
prerogative on
Madam-
conversations that
Madam
happen
Chair,
with the president of El
I
Salvador.
ask a simple question. We have a limited amount of time. I just asked you, Madam Secretary, whether or not you or the Department of Homeland Security are taking any action to facilitate the 9-0 Supreme Court decision to facilitate his return. This is a very simple question. Are you taking any action to facilitate his return, or are you not?
This administration is following and complying with all federal court orders
So
to make sure that we.
So you are, so because the court ordered that you facilitate his return. So you are facilitating his return.
Sir, Senator, thank you for the question. But what I would
Madam
tell you
Secretary-
is that we are following court orders
Madam
and
Secretary.
that your advocacy for a known terrorist is alarming to me.
Madam
It's
Secretary.
alarming to me because he's a human smuggler.
Madam
he's a
Secretary,
wife
I'm going to have to reclaim
and a
my time.
terrorist, and
Madam-
he's not a U.S. citizen. He's a citizen of El Salvador and he's home. If he were to come back
Madam
here,
Secretary.
we would take him immediately
All right,
back.
I'm going to have to, Madam Secretary, you should know a couple facts then, which is number one, in 2019, the immigration court said that he should not be returned to El Salvador because it would put his life in danger. The Trump administration at the time did not appeal that decision. After that, he got a work permit and was working legally in the United States of America. This is also why the district court and the appellate court and the Supreme Court have ruled as they have. I suggest that rather than make these statements here, that you and the Trump administration make them in court under oath, because despite what you just said, the federal district court whose judge is hearing this case right now said, and I'm quoting, that the administration has provided no evidence linking Abrego Garcia to MS-13 or any other terrorist activity. I'm not vouching for the man. I'm vouching for his due
Well, yes,
process
you are,
rights.
sir. You've
No,
been
no,
vouching
no,
for
Madam
him.
Secretary, with
I would
respect.
suggest that you defend and
Madam,
stand alongside
Madam,
the victims
this-
of
you're-
illegal
this is
crime in
political
country, the
rhetoric.
Citizens who live here and
Do
are
you-
United States Americans. I would suggest you advocate for them as hard
Madam
as you do
Secretary,
for foreign
I
terrorists.
know you're doing a political speech
No,
here.
I'm
I
not,
get it.
sir.
I'm asking questions of law. No, you're just spewing
I truly
rhetoric.
believe this. I
Well, you're
truly believe
spewing
this as an
rhetoric. Let me ask
American.
you this. Do you agree with Justice Scalia in the Supreme Court opinion in Reno v. Flores that, I'm quoting, "It is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law in deportation proceedings." End of quote.
Sir, we are utilizing every due process tool that this Congress has afforded us.
This is,
The Congress decides what
Madam
due process
Secretary,
is appropriate for every situation. Expedited removal is a due process that you have afforded us that we are utilizing. The Alien Enemies Act.
I'm going to
is another
reclaim my
tool that
time,
we're
Madam
utilizing.
Secretary.
So
You
we are
are,
giving due
Madam
process
Secretary.
and using the tools
Madam
that this
Secretary,
Congress has given
this
us.
is really, I'm asking sort of simple questions of law and simple questions like,
I would,
are you complying with the 9-0 Supreme Court decision? And you seem to think that's some kind of trick question. Let me ask you this. You were down at CCOT in El Salvador, and you said, and that I'm quoting, "It is one of the tools in the toolkit that we will use." And it's well known that the Trump administration is paying the government of El Salvador to keep these individuals, including those who the U.S. courts have determined were illegally taken out of the country in violation of their due process rights. Have you seen the grant document between the United States and the government of El Salvador with respect to the CCOT?
it's important that everybody knows the consequences of what happens for their actions in this country. When you break the law and you're a member of a foreign
Madam
terrorist
Secretary, I asked you a
organization, there are
question. Have you
consequences
seen
to
the
that.
document? This is not hard.
Yes, I have.
Okay. And what are the provisions of the doc? So do you know what entities in El Salvador are
Sir,
receiving
I'm
the
sure
funds?
you can see this document as well and have
Well,
looked at it for
I'm
evaluation.
glad you
as
raised
well.
that, Madam Secretary, because I sent you a letter along with many of my colleagues here on April 8th asking for, among other things, that document. Will you respond to the letter that we sent?
I will respond to your letter.
Thank you. Can I get some sense of when?
We will take a look at it. I don't remember seeing your letter yet, but I will certainly
Well,
take a
it's
look
been
at
there
it
over
and
a
give you
month.
a
The
response.
senator's time has
No,
expired.
Madam Chair.
Senator Kennedy?
Madam Chair,
Madam
the
Secretary.
Secretary, I have some additional questions.
No,
related
sir,
to
that's up
fire
to
cap.
you to manage that time. Senator Kennedy?
Madam
Well, I need a little
Secretary.
help from a chair that respects the members of the
Madam
committee. I'm sorry, Madam
Secretary.
Chair. This is
You pretty much secured the southern border, haven't you?
Yes, sir. The CBP,
And
this
that
president have.
that upsets some of my colleagues, doesn't it?
Mhm.
They say you've done it the wrong way, haven't they?
Mhm.
Could you answer that?
Yes, sir. They do say that.
Do you think they're upset because you supposedly did it the wrong way, or you think they're upset that you did it at all?
I think they're upset that by President Trump enforcing the law, it happened so quickly and
Yeah.
successfully.
Yeah. Now, when President Biden came into office, the first thing he did was get rid of all of the things we were doing to stop people from coming into our country illegally, didn't he?
Mhm. Yes.
I mean, it was like The Price is Right. Come on down. Except he said, come on in. And most of my Democratic colleagues went along with that, didn't they?
Mhm. Yes, they did.
In fact, they cheered him on, didn't they? Is that a yes?
Yes, sir.
How many people do you think President Biden let into our country illegally? Just give me a ballpark figure.
Sir, we don't know for certain, but we believe it could be upwards to 20 million people that are illegally in this country.
So that's like adding 10 Nebraskas
Mhm.
to our country, isn't it?
That's correct.
Why do you think President Biden and my Democratic colleagues did that? Do you think they believe in open borders?
I think they believed in open borders and letting people come into this country that would affect our society and criminals. Those other countries emptying out the worst of the worst, their mental institutions, their prisons came in here and jeopardized, and known terrorists.
Well, only one or two circumstances are possible.
Mhm.
It seems to me. Either President Biden and the Democrats who supported him believe in open borders,
Mhm.
or the people that President Biden put in charge of securing the border, you wouldn't trust to run a snowball stand, right?
That is correct.
So nobody is that incompetent. So it has to be, they just believe in open borders, do they not?
Yes, because I know the people who were securing the border and they weren't allowed to do their
Do you
job.
think they believe that vetting people at the border is racist?
Yes, I do. I think by the way they allowed people in and granted them immediate parole
Do
status.
you think that President Biden and some of my Democratic colleagues, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, Madam Secretary, thought of these foreign nationals in our country illegally as potential new voters?
Mhm. I do, sir.
Okay. If you're an ordinary American and you oppose illegal immigration, but you support legal immigration,
Mhm.
does that make you a racist?
No, sir. No, sir, not at all. It just means that you believe there should be a rule of law, and that's what America was built on.
And that's what you've been enforcing, right?
Exactly. We have been following the Constitution and the rule of law in this country.
And I want to be sure I understand, because there's been a lot of confusing testimony here. You've secured the border, have you not?
This administration has, yes, sir.
And some of my colleagues are upset with you,
Mhm. Yes, sir.
and they say you did it wrong.
Yes, sir.
And do you agree with me that what they're really upset about is that you did it at all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to ask you a last question about our federal judiciary. I've said repeatedly that all of us has a moral and a civic obligation to follow federal orders, and I stand by that. But there have been a lot of national injunctions, universal injunctions issued to try to stop you from doing your job. Where were these judges when people were breaking the law and coming into our country illegally? Were any of them speaking up and issuing national injunctions against the Democrats?
I don't believe I can be specific about every single judge, but these judges that now are trying to stop us from enforcing our laws, I don't believe or recall them.
Can you
being
think,
vocal then.
Madam Secretary, of one single solitary federal judge who, when President Biden and my Democratic colleagues, not all of them, but many of them,
Gentleman's time has expired.
Secretary or Senator Murray went on over about 2 minutes, so I'm going to take a
Well,
minute.
Senator Van
Well, if
Hollen
you
just got
can-
shut down.
Yes,
right
if
on
you
the
can,
zeros.
if you can finish your question.
Can you recall one single solitary federal judge when President Biden and my Democratic colleagues were letting 20 million people come into the country illegally?
I don't recall.
Can you think of
Thank
one
you.
single solitary judge
you.
that
This is
issued
more
a
than-
national
Thank you.
This is
injunction
more than
to
one
stop
question.
them?
No, I can't recall.
I can't either. If there weren't
you,
for
Senator
double
Kennedy.
standards
Madam
around
Chair.
here,
Okay.
Madam
there
Chair.
wouldn't
So
be any
Senator
standards
Peters.
at all, Madam
any
Secretary.
Thank you.
Committee
Thank
down
you,
there.
Senator Kennedy.
I'd-
Senator Peters.
Madam, let me just say, let's apply the rules fairly. Senator Van Hollen was asking tough questions, but was shut down pretty immediately when his time was expired. Can we at least have a commitment, Madam Chair, that senators on this committee will be allowed to submit questions for the record
Absolutely.
and that you will
Yes.
Absolutely.
ask this?
This Wi-Fi time to act. Bad connection ruining your game night. Switch to a smarter Wi-Fi. That is huge. Full home coverage made easy with Act Smart Wi-Fi.
Detroit and Canada, as you know, one of the busiest border crossings in all of North America. It's scheduled to open this fall. It's going to be a big deal. But my question for you is, how are preparations going for the opening of that bridge? Obviously, your department will play a big role in that opening.
Yes, we're excited about it. We're thankful that the construction has been completed and that it's working well. And we're excited to coming up there and having the celebration with you.
Do you have the resources and personnel in place now?
Yes, we do.
Good. I also appreciated your commitment to fully building out the Northern Border Mission Center, which will be located at Selfridge Air National Guard Base to coordinate all that goes on along the northern border. How is the build out of that center progressing, please?
It's going well. It's on track. I haven't heard of anything that has been delayed, and I can get you a more detailed update though if you would like one.
I would, if we could
Yeah,
follow up
that'd be great.
after this hearing, I would appreciate that. As ranking member of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, I have sent you 9 letters since you have been sworn in as Secretary of Homeland Security. So far, I've received only 2 replies, and quite frankly, one of those was completely unsatisfactory. And while I understand you've had a busy start, like you have a lot on your plate, including travel, responses to congressional oversight requests are a priority. And I think you hold that view, but we're not seeing it being demonstrated, unfortunately. So my question for you is, when can I expect responses to these letters? And can you commit to getting me responses certainly before our budget hearing, before his GAC coming up?
Yes, absolutely. Sir, I was unaware that you had that many letters out yet. I know some of the letters you requested had a lot of data to gather and information. And so that may be to delay on a couple of them, but we will get those gathered and get them to you. As you know, when I came into this role, we had a backlog of letters from senators and congressmen up to 4 years, where the previous administration did not respond to any of you. That was a universal complaint I had from Republicans and Democrats.
Well, we want to see that change. So
Yes.
if we could get this back, these letters back as quickly as possible, I'd appreciate that.
You bet.
As you know, Madam Secretary, Congress spent years creating CISA, clarifying its mission and ensuring that the agency can employ the most skilled federal employees to protect our federal cyber networks and critical infrastructure from attacks. During your confirmation process, you stated that you wanted to get CISA back on mission, but quite frankly, you were very light on specifics of what that actually meant. Now that you've been in your position for several months, could you explain to us in detail what getting CISA back on its mission means? And I mean, with some specificity, which offices and programs in CISA do you consider to be off mission, and which ones do you consider to be on mission?
Well, as you know, CISA, under the last administration, got involved in being somewhat of the role of the Ministry of Truth. They were defining what was misinformation, disinformation. They were out doing election security missions, what were censorship, and deciding what was truth and what wasn't truth. And we have eliminated those functions within CISA. CISA was created to be an entity that supported small and medium businesses and also critical infrastructure,
Yes.
our electrical grid, our
Right.
water systems, that are vulnerable to hacking attempts and influence from foreign countries, but enemies of the United States of America. So we are
Right,
building out
and I
those
agree with all those. I just
Yep.
limited time here.
Yep.
I agree with all that, and that is the central focus that it has to continue. But I want to clarify, because you talked about misinformation. I've heard this a lot.
Yep.
Certainly, I don't want to have any agency putting out misinformation. But CISA had 15 full-time employees assigned to countering misinformation mission. That's 15 employees out of 3,000 employees that work at CISA. And my understanding, and I think you mentioned it, those 15 people are not doing that anymore. So is CISA still not on mission? Is it still?
It's getting there. We don't have our Senate confirmed leader of CISA yet. We're looking forward to that, and the
But
president's
that doesn't have to do with
cybersecurity.
mission. I mean, why is it not performing a mission? Because my frustration is,
Why is what not?
why do you say it's off mission if the unit that was
back-
doing that is gone?
Yeah, it's back on mission, but we still have silos to break down between our
Yes.
intelligence agencies. We still have communication systems that have to be built so we can share information. I shared during my confirmation hearing that one of the most alarming things to me that happened to learn was that when Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon happened, that we knew we'd been hacked, we knew who we'd been hacked by, but we had no idea how to stop it. And so building those relationships with the private sector to help us go out there and really get the information that we need to get the technology and expertise to get in front of those bad actors that would infiltrate our systems, I think is incredibly important. So making sure that we have those partnerships to get them
Right.
with us, sharing information and advice and wisdom on how to stop these hackers before they steal our critical information is very, very important. If you know better than anybody, better than I do even, that we have 10 of the 16 critical infrastructure
Right.
components under the Department of Homeland Security. So this is a top priority of President Trump.
So it is on mission now. CISA's on mission.
It is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Secretary. I know you had an opportunity to take a quick trip up to Kodiak to see Coast Guard men and women there. Thank you for that. I'm pleased to see the focus from the administration with regards to the Coast Guard within the reconciliation package. It is significant. It is meaningful. As I'm looking, though, at the skinny budget that we have here, I'm wondering whether or not the administration's budget request increases the Coast Guard's top line, because as important as it is to do what we're doing in reconciliation, we want to make sure that the service has the sustained funding and support that it deserves in annual appropriations. So I don't know if you want to speak quickly to that.
Well, yes, Senator, it is. We're building out the Coast Guard into the future. We have a request in for 15,000 more individuals that would come in and be a part of the organization. So it's not just the investment in the cutters, which we discussed, as well as, airframe that's been grounded because it needs to be replaced and we can no longer repair it. It is also building out the amount of support that we have as far as individuals and components.
I want to ask about not just the ships, the cutters, the airframes, but the people and where those people live. It was several commandants ago. It was Commandant Zukov who promised that Kodiak, Seward, Sitka, Ketchikan, they were going to get these fast response cutters. Well, the FRCs are out there, but what hasn't come through is the shoreside infrastructure upgrades. Sitka and Seward continue to be left hanging. And so the ships that were due to come to them are being parked in other communities. I mean, we are not only 1 year off, 2 year off, multiple years off. So this is something that I have raised with you, and I'm hopeful that we're finally going to be able to make that commitment to make sure that when you've got the ships, you've got the home port.
Right.
And when it comes to the home port, I think you saw in Kodiak, it's not just the housing. It is the childcare, it's the medical options. And so I'm hoping that as we're looking at this revitalization of the Coast Guard that is so overdue, and I so appreciate the focus that the administration is placing on this, that it really is this whole package.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And when on Force Design 2028, I'll get you the details
Great.
on that so you can see that infrastructure is being addressed. And that was one of the things that was discussed quite extensively when I was up there with the Coasties and folks that were serving, was how challenging it was to be in a remote area and not have the access to basic needs that they have for their family, as well, especially medical care and specialized medical care. So
it is big. So I'm glad you had an opportunity to see that. I want to shift here with regards to parole and temporary protected status. We have a relatively significant population of immigrants in Alaska that are under patrol or TPS or both. They're small, but for us, they're meaningful in our communities. It's the Ukrainians, we have Afghanis, Venezuelans, we have some Haitians. The majority of these folks are just truly valued members of their new community. They're helping us meet workforce needs and really contributing to the tax base here. They've expressed great concern about their status and work authorizations that may be revoked or allowed to expire. So USCIS hasn't processed re-paroles, TPS renewals, or work authorizations for the Ukrainians, at least for almost 5 months. And the concern is they have paid the fees to USCIS to process their applications, and yet they're not seeing any action on this. Can you share with the committee any information on when this pause might end? There are so many that are concerned that the work authorizations will expire while they're waiting for this process.
yeah, we do have several countries that have been evaluated by the administration on their participation in TPS, and the program, as it was established, was meant to be utilized on a temporary basis. So some of these TPS programs have been in place for many, many years. But the evaluation on why TPS should be utilized and when it can be utilized by a country is the process that the administration's going through. So if it's a conflict, environmental, economic concern, something that's going on, and you talked specifically about the Ukrainians as well. I will say that program is still there and being evaluated, but those folks may have gotten an email or something that was not correct and was rectified. So I know some folks were alarmed by that they received, but we did rectify that, and that was sent out. If their legal status had changed, it certainly did not apply to them, and we communicated that with them as well. The one thing I will say is that anyone who is on a program like this or on parole that has been revoked always has the opportunity to apply for asylum as well. And so that is the application that we are forwarding in many of these instances across the country from different countries that interact with us through these different programs.
And again, just the timing of an expiration
Right.
of the work authorization while they're waiting. So as
Yep.
much information as you can share with
You
us,
bet.
and I'm sure other states as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, I'm going to ask you about something I hope we can agree on.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the U.S. Fire Academy? It trains about 100,000 firefighters from around the country.
am. Yes.
So right now, as you may know, it's not being funded. All the in-person classes have been canceled. So I, together with some of my colleagues, including Congresswoman April McLean Delaney, who represents that district in Congress, wrote to you back on March 14th about the situation there. I would just ask, could you commit today to responding to our letter?
I believe we did respond, even if it may have just been recently to you, but those grants and programs are being facilitated, and those dollars will be forwarded. So that is something that if I didn't get that back to you, we will get it to you within 24 hours.
Well, that would be some good news to come out of the hearing, because we really have not heard a thing. I'm reading from a headline: Trump officials silent as firefighters lobby to reopen training academy in Maryland. This is an article from yesterday. So if you're bringing good news today that we're going to renew funding for the National Fire Academy.
That is the direction that we are taking, and we will get that information to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. Senator Haggerty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Secretary, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you too.
I really want to thank you and President Trump and all the men of the Border Patrol and ICE for the incredible amount of work that has gone on in a very short period of time to secure the border. It's made a huge difference in my home state. It's going to continue to make a difference, I'm certain. And I very much appreciate your efforts to bring these illegal aliens to justice as well. President Trump promised to deliver the most secure border on that promise. Encounters at the southwest border are down 95%. And under the Trump administration, getaways are down 99%. Congratulations on that. The Trump administration has ended the crisis that the previous administration created at the southwest border, and you've done it, frankly, in a matter of weeks. My colleagues, and certainly President Biden, argued that we needed new legislation to address the situation at the southern border. I think what you've demonstrated is that was absolutely not the case. I'd like for you, if you would, Secretary Noem, to paint a picture for us. How was it your first day when you arrived at the agency? What sort of state of affairs did you walk into? I want the public to understand how poorly managed the situation was that you've taken on.
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I would say that overwhelmingly, it was a night and day difference as soon as President Trump was sworn into office, because immediately the message was sent out to everyone who worked in the Department of Homeland Security, that we were now going to enforce the law in the United States of America, that we were going to be able to let people do their jobs, which had been so frustrating for so many of our CBP and ICE officers and those who partnered with them. They felt as though they had been facilitating an invasion of our country, and the fact they grew up in these communities. Many of these officers were raised in Del Rio and El Paso and Tucson, and they were, just devastated by what the change they had seen. So the fact that they got to do their jobs again was overwhelmingly, I believe, why this was a success in securing our border, knowing who comes into this country, and stopping those who shouldn't. President Trump, what I'm proud of is that he has removed 252 known terrorists from our country just since he's been in office. Thousands of criminals and illegal aliens that have perpetuated violence on our communities. And I think the employees and the officers that are a part of the Department of Homeland Security are proud to be a part of the solution that's making America very safe again.
Can I stay with the comment that you made, or a term that you used, invasion?
Yes.
Because what we saw over the prior 4 years was the largest invasion of our country that we've ever seen.
It was.
I don't think the American public understands this because it was obfuscated in the media. But could you just break down for us and explain to us how the Biden administration facilitated the invasion of over 10 million people illegally entering this country in 4 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Their lack of enforcement of our laws and their policies facilitated people being welcomed into our country, telegraphed around the world that come to America, the borders are open. When you get there, someone will give you asylum, you'll be protected, will give you housing and food and medical care, free medical care, billions of dollars spent by taxpayers to give them more advantages than what the average United States American citizen gets. That was very clearly telegraphed by their policies, and it devastated so many of our communities. I think most people also recognize that when you welcome people from around the world, you're going to get bad actors too. You're going to get cartel members taking advantage of the situation, terrorist organizations that are going to infiltrate our country, people who have been kicked out of their own countries for reasons that their country would not tolerate. They came here to find a safe haven, and Joe Biden gave them that opportunity. So, it is going to be a big job to clean up the mess that they created, but President Trump is determined to do so, and overwhelmingly, the American people support him in that. They are so thrilled to get these dangerous people off of their streets. When I've been out working with the frontline individuals in the Department of Homeland Security, with our officers, with those that are emergency responders. You can be in New York City, you can be in San Diego, you can be anywhere, and people that are walking their kids to school in the morning are walking by the operations going, thank you.
One last
Thank you
point.
for being here.
The situation in my home state, we're losing about 3,000 kids a year to fentanyl, to overdoses. We've got human trafficking happening from Memphis to Nashville and beyond. And I really want to know, I think the American people expect that this border will be secured, that we can get this stopped, but what resources do you need to make that happen that you don't have today?
Well, you've seen the request from President Trump in reconciliation and in his fiscal year budget. He is doing due diligence to make sure we have the resources that we need to really secure our border, but also to make sure that we are stopping this poison in our communities. It's giving us enforcement tools, more officers out there, more agreements. You've seen us implement 287G with local law enforcement officers and state law enforcement officers that will get us compound our efforts out on the ground. Give us more individuals to clean up the mess, but we also need the technology at our ports to scan packages that come into this country. We've collected, I think, over $36 billion worth of tariffs against other countries because of what President Trump is doing to make sure that we're putting jobs back in the United States of America. But CBP is the ones that are collecting those tariffs, but they also need at our ports of entry scanning technology. So we know what's coming in packages, what's coming in by air freight, that we just haven't been doing due diligence under the Joe Biden administration to really know what the threats are and how those dangerous chemicals and poisons are coming in.
Thank you, Senator Haggerty. For the last round of questions, Senator Murphy.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, one of the accounts that right now is being impounded, I mentioned it in my opening statement, is the Shelter and Services Program. I certainly understand that as a program that Republicans, unfortunately, have not supported, but it was a major element of the budget that we passed, and thus far, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 million that you have not expended. Can you commit to this committee, understanding that you have the ability to decide how that money is spent and who gets that money within the parameters dictated by Congress, but can you commit to this committee that you are going to spend the money in the Shelter and Services account according to the authorization provided to you by Congress?
Sir, we have followed authorizations and the law and how these dollars are being spent. We are not conducting any impoundment. And as you know, under the previous administration, the Shelter and Services Program was being used to facilitate illegal immigration and shelter for criminals in many areas. And so we are using those dollars to how they were intended by Congress when those dollars were put into that program.
But you haven't spent really any of those dollars other than those that you've reprogrammed. And I certainly understand that you do have a right to spend a little bit of time on review, but you do have to spend those dollars. So can you commit to us that you are going to spend the dollars in the Shelter and Services Program on the functionalities and programmatic parameters authorized by Congress?
We're going to follow the authorities that we have under the Department of Homeland Security and the administration for how Congress appropriates funds. Absolutely, we will follow what is authorized and what is the process for how those are traditionally spent.
Madam Chair, my guess is that the administration is not going to spend any of the SSP dollars, that by the end of the year, those dollars will not be spent. And I raise this issue because I admit that this was a priority for Democrats, and that money was included in the budget in exchange for other funds that were priorities for Republicans. If we now live in a world in which the administration spends down the accounts that were priorities for Republicans and does not spend down the priorities that were priorities for Democrats, I don't know how we do a budget. I don't actually know how we come to an agreement if we live in a world in which the administration doesn't spend the accounts that it doesn't believe in. That would be precedent breaking for this Congress. And so I raise this issue because I think it's very relevant to our work, and I think it will make it virtually impossible for us to do a bipartisan budget if by the end of this fiscal year, the $600 million that are sitting in this account that are supposed to be used to treat migrants to this country humanely are not used. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. And we have about 6 minutes left on the vote, so I'm going to make my last round quick. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Center for Domestic Preparedness. It's the preeminent institution when it comes to training and equipping emergency managers and first responders. I certainly appreciate the department's efforts to increase the capacity of our state, local, territorial, and tribal partners to better handle disasters, to respond to civil unrest, and to keep cities safe and secure. With impending events like the World Cup, Olympics, future Super Bowl, et cetera, I want to make sure that we get this training back up and going. My question to you is, when can we expect these classes to be turned back on? And will there be any remedy for classes that were canceled?
Yes, we'll work with you, Senator, to see what we can do for rescheduling classes, and that funding will be continued, and it'll be a priority of the Department of Homeland Security into the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Madam Secretary, we will go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for being here today. I know that we can obviously disagree on policy across this dais, but we certainly agree that we want to make sure that we get timely responses. And on that note, for closing, we will have questions for the record will be submitted and then due on May 15th, so 7 days from now. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and this committee hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Customs and Border Protection, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who show up every single day to keep our borders secure, to keep our communities safe, and to enforce our immigration laws. Since President Trump took back the White House, we have seen historically low levels of encounters along the southwest border. In March 2024, Border Patrol encountered 137,473 people. Fast forward to March of 2025, under President Trump's leadership, Border Patrol encountered only 7,181 people. That's a 95% decrease. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Under the Biden administration, there were nearly 2 million gotaways, and in 2023, the Chief of Border Patrol testified that gotaways may have been underreported by as much as 20%. The work that President Trump and this administration have done to curb the flow of illegal migration is truly incredible. We've gone from record high encounters under the previous administration to two consecutive